December 4th, 1872. The Atlantic Ocean, 400 miles from the Azores. A ship appeared on the horizon. It was sailing perfectly. Sails full, course steady, moving exactly as it should. Except there was no one on board. No captain, no crew, no passengers. The wheel was spinning freely. The last meal was still on the table. The cargo was untouched. 10 people had boarded this ship 27 days earlier. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, their 2-year-old daughter. None of them were ever seen again. The Mary Celeste, the most famous ghost ship in history. And 152 years later, we still don't know what happened. November 7th, 1872. New York City, Pier 50 on the East River. Captain Benjamin Briggs had every reason to be happy. He was 37 years old, respected, successful, a devout man who didn't drink, a captain who had never lost a ship. He had brought his wife Sarah on board, and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. He wrote to his mother the morning they departed. "Our vessel is in beautiful trim. I hope we shall have a fine passage." The cargo, 1,701 barrels of industrial alcohol, bound for Genoa, Italy. The ship had enough food and water for 6 months. The crew were described as, quote, peaceable and first-class sailors. Everything was perfect. That's the first thing that should bother you. The Mary Celeste hit rough seas almost immediately. 2 weeks of storms across the Atlantic. The last entry in the ship's log, November the 25th, 1872. 5 o'clock in the morning. Position near the Azores Islands. Nothing unusual noted. Everything normal. And then, nothing. 10 days passed. 500 miles of ocean drifted by. And somewhere in those 10 days, every single person on that ship vanished. Captain David Morehouse of the Dei Gratia spotted the Mary Celeste at full sail. That's not unusual. What was unusual was that no one responded to his signals. For 2 hours he watched the ship move perfectly through the water, with no one at the wheel. He sent a boarding party. First mate Oliver Devoe climbed aboard, and what he found made no sense. The cargo, 1,701 barrels of alcohol, almost entirely intact. 6 months of food and water, untouched. The crew's personal belongings in their bunks. A child's toys, a woman's dresses packed neatly. Nobody had packed to leave. The ship's navigation charts, scattered. The compass removed from its mount. One of the 2 pumps deliberately disassembled. And the lifeboat, gone. The main rope that would have been used to tow the lifeboat, found broken, hanging over the side. There was water in the hold, 3.5 feet. But here's the thing. 3.5 feet of water was not enough to sink this ship. It was not even enough to slow it down. Marine experts who examined the ship confirmed it was completely seaworthy. There was no reason to leave. The last entry in the log was 10 days old. The ship had travelled 500 miles since then, with no one steering it. 500 miles, alone, in the right direction. The Dei Gratia crew sailed the Mary Celeste 800 miles to Gibraltar. A British Vice-Admiralty court convened an investigation, led by Attorney General Frederick Solly Flood, a man who was, by all accounts, absolutely convinced this was murder. He found what he thought was blood on a sword in the captain's cabin, blood on the ship's railing. Cuts on the hull he believed were made deliberately. Every single one of these tested negative for blood. The sword, rusty iron. The stains, water damage and oxidation. The cuts, made by natural wave impact. After 3 months of investigation, no evidence of foul play, no evidence of mutiny, no evidence of piracy. The Dei Gratia crew were given their salvage award, a fraction of what they deserved. because Soliflood never fully cleared them. But here's a detail that gets buried in most coverage of this case. Captain Morehouse of the Dei Gratia, the man who found the ship, had dined with Captain Briggs just 1 week before they both sailed. They were friends. They left New York 1 week apart, both heading to Gibraltar. Soliflood thought that was suspicious, and he was never fully wrong to think it. 152 years of theories, let me give you the real ones, and tell you exactly why each one falls apart. Theory 1, piracy. The crew was murdered and the ship was robbed. Problem, nothing was stolen. $37,000 worth of alcohol, captain's money, personal valuables, all there. No pirate in history has ever left that behind. Theory 2, mutiny. The crew killed the captain and his family, then fled. Problem, Captain Briggs handpicked every single crew member. They were described as peaceable. The cargo was industrial alcohol, undrinkable. There was no motive. And if they mutinied and fled, where did they go? A lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic takes you nowhere. Theory 3, alcohol fumes explosion. 9 of the 1,701 barrels were found empty. Industrial alcohol, highly volatile. The theory, fumes built up in the hold caused a small explosion or a pressure blast. Panicked the captain into ordering an evacuation. Problem, no scorch marks, no burn damage, no evidence of any explosion whatsoever. But this is actually the most scientifically supported theory. And here's why. In 2006, researchers at University College London recreated the conditions. They used the same type of barrels, the same alcohol. When the fumes ignited, the explosion produced no soot, no burn marks, no scorch damage. A flameless pressure wave, powerful enough to blow open a hatch, loud enough to terrify an entire crew, but leaving no physical evidence behind. So here's what might have happened. The explosion of vapor, a terrifying roar, hatches blown open. Captain Briggs, a man who never drank, had no experience with alcohol fumes. He ordered everyone into the lifeboat, attached a rope to the ship. They waited, watched, planned to reboard when the danger passed. And then the rope broke. The Mary Celeste, still under sail, pulled away from them, in an Atlantic storm, in a small open lifeboat, with a 2-year-old child. They never reached land. This is the most likely explanation, and it's still only a theory. Even if you accept the alcohol vapor theory, there are 4 details nobody has ever explained. Detail 1. Captain Briggs was known as a man who would never abandon his ship. He was described by everyone who knew him as someone who, quote, would not abandon his ship unless to save his life. Whatever he saw, it convinced him his life was in danger. We don't know what it was. Detail 2. The navigation instruments, the sextant, the chronometer, and the ship's papers, all missing. You take those with you when you plan to come back. You take those with you when you're navigating. You do not take those when you're running from an explosion. Someone packed deliberately. Someone planned to leave. Detail 3. The ship's cook had been preparing food when they left. The stove was still warm when the boarding party arrived. Not hours warm, days don't pass with a warm stove at sea. This has never been adequately explained. Detail 4, and this is the one that keeps people up at night. Baby Sophia, 2 years old. Her toys were in her cabin. Her clothes were packed and folded. Her food was in the ship's stores. In 152 years, not a single trace of that child has ever been found. The Mary Celeste kept sailing. New owners, new crew, new voyages, for 13 more years. Every crew that sailed her knew the story. Sailors are superstitious by nature. This was the ship where 10 people vanished, and still she sailed. January 1885, Haiti, the Rocheleau Reef. The Mary Celeste's final captain, Gilman Parker, deliberately ran her aground. Insurance fraud. He claimed the cargo was worth far more than it was. He was caught, tried, and the case collapsed before verdict. He died shortly after, broke and disgraced. The ship that survived everything ended because of human greed. In 1884, before the wreck, a young author wrote a short story about the Mary Celeste. His name was Arthur Conan Doyle. Before he created Sherlock Holmes, he wrote a ghost story about this ghost ship, and the world has never forgotten it since. Captain Briggs, Sarah, Sophia, 8 sailors. The alcohol vapor theory is the most likely. The broken rope is the most plausible end. But most likely is not the same as knowing. And until someone finds that lifeboat at the bottom of the Atlantic, the Mary Celeste remains exactly what she has always been, a ship that sailed without its people, and a mystery that sails on without its answer. The case is open. The Unresolved is watching. Subscribe to the Unresolved, because some cases were never closed, some truths were never found, and we're not done looking.